Okay, in this tutorial what we're going to look at is a simple way to make a selection of the sky in Photoshop. We're actually starting in Lightroom, but we're going to go into Photoshop after and make the sky a little bit more enhanced on this photograph. And this is one of those typical photographs where you've got that bland sky and you want to get some detail back in there. Now first of all, obviously you've got to have some detail in there, so I'm just going to use the sliders in Lightroom and take down the highlights and see, and probably the exposure, and see if I can get some detail from the sky. And you can see I'm getting all the detail is there. That's the important part, to make sure that it's there. It doesn't matter how far you take the exposure down to get that sky, we can get some detail from it. But the trouble is with doing that is if we can't always get enough detail without it affecting all the rest of the image. And there are tools in Lightroom that allow you to select an area of the sky and that, but really I don't like to use Lightroom for that use. But the two programs working together is really good, because Lightroom is what we use to get our pictures in a collection, to get them all stored nicely on the computer, and also to give us some raw conversion. But that is all I use it for. I don't use it for any editing, because Photoshop is much better at doing that. So I don't go through all the trauma of trying to make selections in Lightroom when another program can do it better. So what I would do in this case is, first of all, let's just reset the image. I know the details there, and what I'm going to do is to go down to the bottom here on the view of the images, on the thumbnails, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to create a virtual copy. Okay, so what we then get is two images. You can see one of two there, and you can see this has got like a little fold in it, so that's the virtual copy. So we've got the image twice. And the reason I'm doing this, I'm going to click back on the original one. You can see one of two and two of two there. The reason I'm doing this is because I can now set the image, do the raw conversion, and set the image for the foreground on the one, and then go to the second one and just apply the settings I want for the sky. And then when we go in Photoshop, we can create a mask and virtually straight away get the perfect exposure. So I'm going to start with image one, and what I'm going to do with this is apply the settings that I want. I'm just going to bring the blacks down a bit. I'm using the histogram. We've talked about raw conversion before, so basically I'm just looking at the foreground. I'm ignoring the sky completely. I just want to get some nice looking details in the foreground. I'll add some vibrance and a bit of saturation. So we're not going to go mad, because basically this is just an example, and this was a shot took out of a car at about 40 miles per hour with just a snap out the car window, so it's nothing special. But it does show you the type of picture that many people get, where you just want to bring some detail back in the sky. And the important thing to remember is every photo is different. They're all different situations, and this is the type of way to work if we've got a nice clear sky. In other words, no obstructions like trees or whatever. We can do that in other ways. So we've just got a nice plain contrast between the sky and the mountains there, or it could be a seascape, which would be similar. So there's a nice pronounced difference between the two, the foreground and the sky there. So now what we've done, the foreground rather, we've got the foreground looking how we want it. Now we go to the other image, to number two, and what I'm going to do this time is take the exposure down, and I'm just looking at the sky. I'm ignoring everything else. I just want to get the detail in the sky that I want. Bring the highlights down, bring the exposure down. I don't want to go too mad. I want it to look realistic, so I'm not going to be bring up some vibrance and a bit of saturation to give it a bit of a... Okay, so we're working with the sliders, and it's basically just plain and thinking, well, all I'm thinking about is the sky. I'm not interested in any other part of the image. I just want to get the sky with that detailing. And it's best not to go too over the top because it just looks totally unreal. I'm going to bring the whites up. I've got the highlights almost all the way down and the whites up fairly high to get the exposure correct. And then the shadows, that will add a bit of contrast to there. We can use a contrast also if we want to. Okay, so let's go for that. This is just an example, so I'm not going to be too fussy. So we've got that. Okay, so we've now got our two images, the foreground on that one and the sky on that one. What I'm going to do is to click on this one, hold down the shift key and click on the second one so it highlights the two images, and then I'm going to right click on either one and I'm going to go edit in, and then right at the bottom you've got open as layers in Photoshop, and I'm going to click on that. So what it will then do is place one picture on top of the other in Photoshop as layers. So there we go, we've now got the two layers. Now the important thing is we can see the top layer. If I hide that, you can see the one underneath with the sky on. So we've got the two images. The important thing is to make sure that the layer that is set for the foreground is the one on the top, because it just makes it easier if you do it that way. So if it wasn't, you would simply drag it below the other one. So you can move them on the layer palette by dragging them in the correct order. So we've got the foreground image at the front. Now we've got a really plain white sky, so therefore it's going to be really easy to select that sky just by simply using the quick selection tool. So if we click on the quick selection tool, I'm going to make the brush a bit bigger. I'm just simply going to click and drag it across there, and you can see because the sky is so bland, straight away we've got this perfect selection of the sky. But what I actually want is the reverse of that. So I'll go to select on the menu, inverse. That inverses the selection, and once we've done that, we look at our layer palette, and at the bottom we've got the mask button there, which will produce a mask. So we'll add a layer mask, and when we click on that, straight away you can see we have now got our image below coming through and showing the sky from the previous image. And that's really quick and easy to work with. Now, let's say I thought the effect was a little bit too more powerful. What you can do is if we go to the bottom and create a blank layer, and we colour that white, so I'm just going to get white there and use the paint bucket tool. So we've got the foreground colour set as white, click on there and we've got white there. And what I'm going to do is to drag this layer to the bottom. So layer 1 down to the bottom. And the reason I've done that is because I take the opacity down on this layer now. So I'm on the layer with the sky. If I take that down a little bit, if I think it's a bit too much, I can now take it down. With that white in the background, it's not just going to give me a transparent effect, it's going to use that white background to create a solid effect as such. So I think it looks more realistic about that setting. So it's just a little bit, I've brought it down to 89%, 89, 90%. And there's the image, and simply when we're happy with that, all we've got to do is right click, flatten the image, and now we've got our detail back in the sky. So it's a really quick, easy way that works really successfully and gives a nice natural result.